Welcome back. In this third video, we're going to talk about a way to implement a class declaration in a single file. And this is often quite is reasonable to do this when you have a very simple class where you have either very few member functions or the functions themselves are very simple. So we're going to look at the file called class square inline. And where is it? Right here. Let's take a look at what it looks like. It looks pretty much as it did before, but notice that instead of having just prototypes, we're actually having the actual definition of each of the functions where we give the bodies for all of the functions. All right. Again, when you do this, this is doable when you have something very simple. Let's look at the main program that uses an inline definition of a class. And a couple things to note is that you have to include not the .h file, but the .cpp file. And why is that? Well, the only file that exists for the class is the .cpp file, so you will have to include it. If you include it, you're basically including the specification and the bodies for all the functions. So we have the same program we had before, but it is implemented a different way. So let's take a look when we go and compile this. So over here, if we want to compile the class implementation, we do G++ this file. So let's just get out of this. And we're going to do that compilation. And when we do that, let's take a look at the .o files that exist. All the .o files. And we have a file called class square inline.o. Alright? Now notice that this compilation merely assures you that the class file that you wrote works. Okay, so we can also compile it a different way, just compile it with the main, because the main includes that file. We first verified that the file by itself will compile. Now it's safe to combine it to compile the main, which includes that file. So when we do that, we have sqri.run, and again when we run it, we're going to see that it behaved the same way as doing it the different way. Let me give you another reason why you would have an implementation file and a specification file. Normally, when you have lots of people working on the same program, the specification file gives enough information for other people to write their code that calls the member functions when those functions are being provided. Alright, so that way people can work separately on a project. Now let's kind of finish this off. I think we're almost done. So here's our summary. We're going to summarize what we've seen over the last. A class can be defined using multiple files. So let's take a quick look at the general view of a spec file. See what we have here. Specification file is the bare bones thing. We have a public section, a private section, and you have prototypes here. I should say the word. All these things, all the functions are prototypes only in the specification file. If we look at the definition file or the implementation file, what do we have? And where are we? Oh, the definition file is the CPP file, and you will have the bodies for the functions and for the constructors. All right, and the bodies have to be tagged with the class that these functions belong to. All right, that's the thing to note. Plus we have an inline, which we've seen. Here's a basic template for that, where we have bodies for things. All right. Now, let's back off and we'll give you some work to do. Let's take a look at what your work is. Here's what I want you to do. There's no grader, but I will grade by the presence of these files. So if you submit, I will see it and give you some points for it. In the class square inline file, I want you to add a member function called show. And all show will do is print out the size of the square. So if you have a square that has a side of length 4, it will print out 4 space x space 4. All right? So I want to add that to the inline. In the main program, you need to call the show function for each of those square objects that you have in the main. All right? And once you've done that, you want to submit the inline, the modified inline functions. Modified inline main programs. Submit these programs. I'm tied up here. And then do the same thing for the separately compiled classes. And that will be evidence that you've viewed the videos and you've done what I've asked you to do. Merci beaucoup.